Welcome to the Athletic FC podcast with me, Ayo Akinwolere. How will the victory over Spurs influence Arsenal's title challenge? And do they need to strengthen this month if they are to catch Liverpool? Here with us today, we have the Athletics football correspondent, David Ornstein, along with our Arsenal writer, Jordan Campbell as well. David, let's come to you first on this one. Great result for Arsenal in terms of local pride, but I wondered what we learnt about this team with that win over Tottenham on Wednesday night, especially the fact that Arsenal actually came back to win that match.
I don't think we learned a great deal, Io, that we didn't already know. And I don't say that in a disrespectful way, because we've seen Arsenal under Arteta being moulded for quite some time now. There's definitely a great spirit there. They have had to respond to adversity in the past, and they've done that to varying degrees. So during the season, they tend to do it quite well. You could ask why they're suffering that adversity in the first place, but many teams do. And then they fight their way back into contention. And to be fair, it happened before under Arsene Wenger and even Unai Emery to an extent. I remember when years ago at the Emirates, when they were on a losing run, then Man United came in the league and they ended that losing run by beating Man United 2-1, I think it was, and then that stabilised things, and the Wenger out chance dissipated for a while and everybody was happy, and then they hit another downward spiral. They've responded less well to adversity when it's come to the crunch, towards the end of seasons, when under Emery and in the early stages of Arteta, when they were trying to qualify for the top four, they had vital fixtures towards the end of the season, and they fluffed their lines and didn't manage to qualify for the Champions League, but they've sort of overcome that, and their title challenges of the last two seasons have been really impressive. They're back in the Champions League, and what we saw against Tottenham was a team that, despite their injuries, and I don't think that's a great mitigation, because every team's got injuries, Tottenham not least, because they've been savaged by them. But 3 games without a win, huge pressure. The night before, Liverpool and Nottingham Forest, their two immediate competitors for the title right now, had drawn, so it was a chance. And Arsenal have had chances in the past when others have slipped up, just recently even, with Liverpool not having the best results in the last month or so. And they haven't capitalized on it. Well, on this occasion they did, and they've showed there is vast quality there. The last 3 matches, they create chances by the barrel load. It's just about finishing them off. And what it said to me was that, look, Arsenal will be in this title race. I do believe that. How credibly they challenge come the end, whether they manage to overhaul their rivals, we can't say at this point. But there is enough there that there is so much riding on it for Mikel Arteta this season, for Arsenal, for some of those players with points to prove that some of the recruitment was at the sort of age of delivering in terms of their maturity and their price tags and the salaries and things, and the feeling among the fan base that trophies need to be at the very least contested for, and ideally they need to arrive now, and so that felt like a sort of really important moment. But I do think we need to remember the context. It was a narrow victory against a Spurs side who are not having a good season in the league, who are depleted themselves, who Arsenal tend to beat at home, and so it's not changing the face of the earth. Arsenal need to go on a consistent run of form in this second half of the season to really put them in the frame for the Premier League, for the Champions League, and maybe even yet for the League Cup if they can turn it around at Newcastle, which will be a massive task. But in terms of confidence, belief, responding to the adversity of losing Saka and more recently Jesus, of questions about their quality and their chances and their belly, then they've sort of gone some way to answering those doubts, but they haven't provided full answers just yet.
Yeah, Jordan, David talks about confidence and belief. I was sat with the Arsenal fans yesterday at the Emirates, and from the off, the fans were screaming, shouting. It's a derby game. They were up for it. Even after Son Heung-min scored, the crowd was still behind this team. I'm just thinking what this meant for this team after the defeats to Newcastle, after the defeats to Manchester United, and the manner of those defeats, how important it was for Arsenal to respond in this match.
Well, I think the players feeling that love again was probably really important for them, because the last couple of games, we've spoken about the atmosphere not being great. Arteta sometimes turning around to the fans asking more. sometimes when the players, trying to G up the fans at corners, they've not been getting the reception. Now, maybe that's because it's cup games and there's not the same fans there on the whole. But I thought last night it was back to what Arteta wants it to be, and I think that can supercharge the team. When they go 1-0 down, it'd be quite easy for the fans to turn on them and start losing patience. But they stuck with them, and I think Arsenal on another day win 6-7-1. That's how many chances they created. I think Declan Rice said he felt it could have been 10. So I don't think that is an exaggeration given how many counter-attacks they had in the first half, how many near misses they had in the second half where they never get the shot off. But as David says, that's not new for Arsenal. We know this team can dominate very good teams. We know they rarely lose against a big six team. The problem is converting it, and whether when you look at Liverpool, even against Forest, I know they drew, but they didn't play great in the first half. But then you always feel like Liverpool can bring three players off the bench to change their attack, and they'll have their half an hour where they get the goal, they get two goals, they get three goals in quick succession. The problem for this Arsenal team is that even when they're playing very, very well, they don't go through the gears enough and go and kill games off within half an hour. I think they had the chance to do that last night. As I said, it was a good result and they played really well, but it could have been more emphatic. But yeah, I think the same questions over firepower still remain, especially with Saka going to be out, and Arteta obviously sounded very, very keen to get at least one body in to try and help that crisis.
I'd just add that there's an element of fickleness among all of us. I'm not putting that on fans, but we include supporters in that of all clubs, I'm sure. One moment that it was all doom and gloom after defeat against Manchester United and news of Jesus' injury and horrendous abuse for Kai Havertz and it extended to his wife. Unspeakable, really. This is a player who has been one of the most influential starters, and especially in 2024, his numbers are really impressive. He's a very popular figure at Arsenal. And then, from doom and gloom to beating your local rivals and people are sort of throwing their shirts into the crowd and dancing around the pitch. And I think with Arsenal now, a little bit of equilibrium is needed. And they'll be the first to admit that. They need to start seeing off matches like this, the recent games with all those chances that have gone begging. If they're going to be a serious contender for the trophies that they want to, it's not the extreme low of defeat they've been feeling recently and the extreme height of a victory over Spurs. It's like just calming things down and trying to form some consistency that ultimately makes title-winning teams.
I've said it before, but I think Arsenal are psychologically in games for far too long, that they've played well enough that they should have killed it, and it should be a time when you start rotating and you start just managing the game. Like that last 10 minutes was far more nervy than it had to be. And I just think
it's also a derby game, Jordan. Do you know what I mean? Anything can happen in those kind of games, right?
Of course, but I think Arsenal should have been 4-5 clear, and it's a bit of a pattern when they go 1-0 up and they can't quite get that second to kill it or quite get that advantage. And I just think over a long time that can have a fatiguing element to it, where you're constantly in games. There's very rarely 3-4-0 wins where it's just done and dusted. And that's what I think last season after the break, there was 2-3 months which they just ticked them off, and the games go by quick and they come thick and fast, and all of a sudden you're counting down to the end because they were killing games off, they were being ruthless. And I think that is the one thing this team does lack, is just that ruthless edge, because they've got the best defence in the league. They've had it for now 2 and a bit years. That's not questioned. The pressing's great. It's just that final action a lot of the time.
Jordan is spot on. They need to be killers, and that's the only way that they'll challenge seriously for these titles, because that's what they exhibited at their best under Arteta, and they're not right now. I don't mean to be a doom monger, but I absolutely felt that Tottenham would open the scoring in that match last night. The way Arsenal have been missing chances recently, despite their dominance, and by the way, we've seen this it's not by any means the first time that Tottenham have taken the lead at the Emirates Stadium. It's almost like a pattern that then kicks them into life and makes them realise that they have to finish their chances. You might say they were fortuitous, and Tottenham fans certainly would, to receive the corner that led to their equaliser. And then, the what proved the winning goal really should have been saved by Tottenham's goalkeeper. And despite all of Arsenal's chances, Tottenham did have some moments that were hairy for Arsenal as well. That is not anywhere near trophy winning form. And they do really need to recapture it. And without meaning to just lead us straight into one of our next topics, they need to be ruthless in attack and clinical. And right now, they're not. It's hard to believe the chances that they're missing at the moment. And it just seems to be routine now. And if it's not rectified, then they'll be out of contention quite soon, because they won't get away with those narrow defeats when it comes to the crunch.
Yeah, definitely want to talk about what Arsenal might need to bring in potentially, David. But Jordan, I'm just looking at this title race right now, and we look at Liverpool dropping points, some might say, against Nottingham Forest, and having quite an interesting last month or so. Arsenal naturally haven't capitalised in a way we'd love to see it. What do you make of this title race? Because still 17 games to go. There's still a lot to play for.
Yeah, it's still a long way, and I think any Arsenal fan listening will now know, having not been in a title race for so long before 2022, 23, I always think back to that Bournemouth game and the celebrations at the end when that Reece Nelson goal went in. And at that point, I along with a lot of people, thought, that's it, it's their time. But you realise there was still like 13 games to go. So I think it sort of taught people that, the title race is not, you're not in the final ones. I think it was Gary Neville that said it. Nothing really counts until sort of April, May time. So I think there's still plenty of time for Arsenal to claw it back from Liverpool. And what I would say is that, since Odegaard came back, Arsenal, if you look at 90-minute games, because they could obviously still go to St James's and overturn that Newcastle defeat, they are unbeaten as a team. They're 11 unbeaten in the league. Whether 7 wins and 4 draws will be enough if they sustain that, I don't know, because draws are not going to be, if you keep having draws every 3-4 games, it's difficult. Look back to those Everton Fulham games, felt like missed opportunities. So, yeah, I think that was really important that they got the win over Tottenham the day after Nottingham Forest, because those slight momentum shifts, even psychologically, I think those Arsenal players will be thinking, right, we're back in it now. We're really, even. There's a point, there's a game in hand for Liverpool, but you would always rather have the points on the board. They have to still go and win a Merseyside derby, so they're definitely still in it, Arsenal. Obviously, the last week going out 2 other trophies was difficult, but they're still very much in the league, and they've shown last year when that very much the same Liverpool squad. They tailed off while City and Arsenal were able to sustain it. So I don't think Arsenal players, now they're experienced, they know what it takes to get into those final months and still be in it. So I don't see Arsenal going away. Whether they can match the points total that they got last year will basically require them to be almost perfect now. So whether they can do that, what they did last year, it looks difficult because, as me and David have said, they've not been playing at the same way they were from that sort of January to May period last year, where it was just relentless and it just felt like every game was just a gimme that they were going to win. Whether they can click into that gear, they're going to. It looks like they might be going to Dubai for around a week now. So whether that little break can I think a lot of people look at that. And
You say Dubai, it means it's loaded now. That
yeah, a lot of people are looking at it as some sort of secret ingredient where they come back into the team. But I interviewed Cedric Suarez, and he said, even just going there, everything dials down, because we know how intense Arteta can be.
Yeah.
Just going there, everything relaxes a bit. The families come, and it can be even just mentally for a week. It might just take the sting out of things, because this is the last month has been every 3 days. If you're Kai Havertz and you've missed 4 chances, you don't have any time to just get away from it and all the abuse that he suffered. So I think you could see that even last night, is that he's just lacking that little bit of confidence again, which he had in 2024. So if they can get him back into feeling that he's very, very best, then I'm sure he can go and go and be that 20 goal striker that they've lacked, because he's what, 12 and 27, 28 this year. I think if he can get to 20, that's a good return. But without Saka, they really need somebody else, a Martinelli, a Trossard, maybe Rice from 8. They need somebody to go and get 7 to 10 goals in these final games.
David, Arteta very open about his hopes to strengthen the forward line this month. We spoke on Tuesday about this ahead of the confirmation over Gabriel Jesus' injury. How much does that now force Arsenal's hand into action this month? Because the name Sesko, the name Vlahovic has been floating around in terms of what kind of potential business Arsenal could be doing.
Yeah, the injury to Jesus definitely intensifies their need and desire to do something in the market. They're always attentive to any transfer market, but I was quite clear early on that I didn't expect them to be the most active team based on what they were planning at that time and the resources available to them and the knowledge that they would always prefer to do their business and execute plans in a summer window, even more so since the departure of Edu as sporting director, which came somewhat out of the blue to them. And yeah, okay, you would have already had most of your thoughts in place around January, but it means it's a change in that dynamic with Jason Ato in position on an interim basis. Now they have to sort of rethink, and there's very little time to try and reformulate and pounce upon potential situations. But there is time, and a club like Arsenal will always attract players, and players will be made available to them. Conversations will be taking place. They are taking place about all manner of different scenarios. And that means names will come flying out left, right and centre. Some of them might have some credence. Some of them won't have any at all. And some of them somewhere in between. And look, Mikel Arteta's ideal situation, his dream, would be to sign Alexander Isak. That's a player he's been a fan of for a long, long time. And Arsenal sort of pursued him to some extent in, wasn't it, January a few years ago? He ended up moving to Newcastle. He's done fantastically there, especially when he's fit. They have no intention of selling him. And if he is to leave, he's going to go at an amazingly high price. And I don't see that being feasible for Arsenal or anybody else right now, and it might not even be in the summer. Let's see what happens in the contract negotiations for him as well. But Newcastle are in a strong position. They don't expect him to go. There will be other players that, Arteta and the Arsenal recruitment operation and hierarchy take a look at, are offered. So you see names like Vlahovic. They tried to sign him in the past. It didn't happen when he went to Juventus. It was a very difficult situation at the time, with the finances involved, with his preference above all else, with representatives. Not an easy picture. It seems, Juventus are ready to part with him, and they've brought in Randal Kolo Muani, which is a further indication of that. It's not been going well for Vlahovic. But I don't know, say Arsenal want to loan a player in the January transfer window. They can only do an overseas loan because their domestic Premier League place is already full. And if they were to look at someone like Vlahovic, I don't know of Juventus being ready to loan him out. They want a sale, I think, from what I've been told. Now, that could be a loan to a club with an obligation to buy. It's the same thing as a sale. But immediately that would commit you to finances in this cycle of PSR because the obligation is sort of factored in. Can an Arsenal or other clubs afford that? Do they want to? Does he want to join them? There are many factors involved in this. In the case of Arsenal, my early inquiries suggested he's not a player that they're particularly hot on at the moment. There are reports that they like him and are going for him. I can only be true to my information, and at the time of recording, it's not one that I think is developing. Let's see if that changes. Benjamin Sesko is somebody that they've liked as well for a long time. A move in January, I'm told, is unlikely. You never say never, but if he's going to leave RB Leipzig for anywhere, the probability, having not long ago signed a new contract, is that it would be next summer. And there will also be scrutiny on whether he's ready for the role, his season, his form. He's a player I really like, and Arsenal clearly have massive admiration for, and is destined for a big move, but it's not one I'm expecting to happen in the next couple of weeks. I'm trying to think of other names who might come into the frame. Do Arsenal focus more on a wide player instead, like somebody who can contribute goals from the wing, and with Saka out injured in particular. So the player that Mikel Arteta loves, and it's one we've reported before, is Nico Williams of Athletic Bilbao. But as I've explained in my recent reporting, there is a release clause. It's just shy of 60 million euros at the moment. It fluctuates with inflation. It needs to be paid in full, so that's not easy for any suitors. He is on a high salary. That salary would go up if he was to move. He's going to need to want to move, and I'm not aware of him agitating or looking to move in January. More likely the summer if it happens. His preference was, I think, Barcelona, or they came close in the summer. It didn't materialise for one reason or the other. If he is going to move, there's going to be other suitors in the frame like Chelsea, etc. And so that's one that it feels remote. That Arsenal will have multiple targets, and they've got to be careful with the finances. So if they're going to press ahead with a deal for Martin Zubimendi in the summer, that's going to be what, 60, 65 million euros, depending on if they pay the clause or go above it and pay in installments. So that's a big financial commitment on the horizon that inevitably will raise questions about how much they're able to spend in January. If they can afford to do something now, would it be a relatively modest permanent transfer fee because of what's potentially coming in the summer? Or are they able to go bigger? If they're able to go bigger, what repercussion does that have? Do they then have to sell a big player in the summer to comply with PSR? And who would that player be? Like, who would Arsenal fans want to see go, and where's the market? Would that player want to go? What I'm trying to explain here is there's so many moving parts that it's not quite as binary as many of us like to think, and there will be all sorts of factors that come into the equation for a potential January deal. And one thing Arsenal will be most conscious of is if they've got things lined up for the summer, maybe they can bring something forward, which many clubs will be considering at this point in time. But if they were to do something now that jeopardizes that summer work, how sensible is it? If it's deemed that it's plausible now, great. What if the player doesn't want to come? What if they can't make the money work? What if the club is unwilling to do business now, but they will in the summer? Do you do a stopgap solution and return to that loan focus? I think right now it's most plausible that they look for a non-Premier League loan. But so much can change. We didn't anticipate Raheem Sterling signing on deadline day last summer, and then that materialised. So I don't want to sort of come across as the wise man and then it all proves to be different in a couple of weeks' time. I think we're just going to have to see how it plays out. And the final point I'd make on it is that Arsenal's first choice striker is Kai Havertz, whether people like it or not. He was ahead of Gabriel Jesus in the pecking order. So when Jesus is lost to injury, it's a crushing blow, especially because of his form and popularity and the injuries that he's had previously. But Kai Havertz is in front of him, and so he's fit and available. And his record has been decent in his time at Arsenal. And yeah, they've lost Saka, but they've also got Martinelli and Trossard and Martin Odegaard in that part of the pitch as well. Ethan Nwaneri is going to come back to fitness. If it's not before the end of the month, it'll be very, very shortly afterwards. So I understand and acknowledge and agree in part with the desire of Arsenal fans to bolster. I'm just trying to lay out a picture that is not as easy as many of us think.
Yeah, Jordan, along with Amy Lawrence, James McNicholas, and also Art de Rocher, you contributed to the piece on The Athletic about where things have shown signs of going wrong for Arsenal this season. You've looked at the impact of injuries. Mikel Arteta couldn't have banked for that. But then it got me thinking, what do you then make of the summer business then? Because you've got players like Marino, you've got players like Calafiori. Obviously, Marino unlucky to have had an injury right early on after signing on for Arsenal, but Calafiori can't really be fit for more than 1 or 2 games. Are there positions that Arsenal needed to buy players in, or were there more pressing matters at hand?
Well, I think everyone went into the summer expecting at least a forward, whether it was a winger for to be a backup on both sides. But for Saka has held that position for himself for 4 years now. Martinelli hasn't quite been able to capture his form for a couple of years back, so it felt like it was natural for someone to come in and challenge them, and also someone to come in as backup for for Kai Havertz, because we've seen Gabriel Jesus' injury record in recent years he's been very unfortunate with injuries, and Kai Havertz came in with the plan to be a left eight. So that evolved last season because different reasons. Jesus injuries picked up. Havertz then looked much more comfortable there, and the team just seemed to click around him. But it was still pretty much, it fell into place rather than being the product of a long-term plan to have Havertz as number nine. So I think if you looked at the summer, I thought they did need a left back because clearly Arteta, Zinchenko's fallen down his the pecking order, and I don't think he really fits the profile of player that he's now wanting to have in there. So that felt natural to bring someone in. I think the left eight was another one, especially with Vieira and Smith Rowe going out. But I think it was the profile of Marino that was maybe surprising because it sort of suggested that Declan Rice was going to be the six if Marino was playing at eight. But obviously the fractured shoulder in his first training was really unlucky. So Rice took over the reins there. Thomas Partey being back is like a new player when he missed most of the last season for injury. So there's a lot of moving parts that have happened in the last year. Some by design, some by luck or misfortune. But you know, looking at Marino, he's not made the impact yet that was expected. Calafiore's picked up 4 different injuries, and Lewis-Skelly looks like it's his position now. So you look at that £80 million that they spent, and it's not really affected the first 11. You think if you had found a way of putting some of that money into maybe a versatile forward, a goal scoring winger, someone like that, it could have maybe helped out with this crisis. But I think, yeah, looking forward to the summer as well. It's very interesting that Zubimendi is a deal that they're looking to try and get over the line because, again, it's making you think, okay, so Partey and Jorginho are out of contract. Potentially, maybe one stays, maybe both stay, maybe both go. But Zubimendi's a six. There's no question over that. So that then suggests that Rice then has to move to eight again. What does that mean for Marino? What does it mean for Kai Havertz if they then go and bring in a Sesko or someone in the summer? Because presumably they would come in as a number nine. So you've got the two players in Marino and Havertz that Arteta did actually recruit for the left eight role. And it might actually now be Declan Rice that he's decided is the one that fits his profile. I wrote the piece the other day, just basically outlining that argument because Rice, I don't think, has quite hit the heights that he hit last season. But last night against Spurs, I think was probably his best game of the season. He could have had 2 3 goals, and I think that you've seen in an open game it does suit him. It's in the other games where Arsenal are having to break down teams and there's very little space. Is playing Declan Rice at eight, where he's got to be intricate around the box and there's not much space to run into. Is that the best use of his abilities? He can do it and he's good at doing it. But is he better as a six where he can break up play and then go and drive into space? I think that's the big question. And Zubimendi, if he does come in, that will be the big question: is can Rice actually become that number eight that Arteta seems to think that he can fit his profile that he's clearly tried with Marino and Havertz and it hasn't quite worked.
Okay, David, Arsenal have been resourceful in previous windows. You think about a couple of years ago, January, when Mikhail Mudryk was supposed to be coming to Arsenal. Didn't happen, ended up going to Chelsea. Arsenal pivoted to sign Leandro Trossard. And I'm also very disappointed you didn't send me your usual Trossard gif when he scored yesterday. David Ornstein has a way of sending me a Trossard gif every time he scored because he loved that transfer. But the real talk is, could something similar happen? Could something similar be needed this month where Arsenal have to react to the market because of the deficiencies they have in the squad?
Yeah, just to be clear to the listeners, I do send gifts on other players as well. I don't have a Trossard obsession, although I do like his celebration. And it was a really good transfer, wasn't it? If you reflect on it now, it's proved good value for money. A bit of a surprise given the expenditure on a player of his age, and it wasn't going well at Brighton in terms of the relations, but some good recruitment from Arsenal in recent years, and we can't accuse the ownership, KSE, of not supporting them in the market. They've spent a lot of money. They've backed Mikel Arteta wholeheartedly. They gave him and Edu as sporting director, a lot of resource to act upon, and it's helped bring Arsenal up to this level that I know there's a lot of dissatisfaction, but the expectations have risen because they've been doing a lot better in recent years, and that's kind of like a good problem to have, and they'll now need to live up to those heights and hopefully for them surpass them. So one thing I'd point out, and you sort of scratched at the surface here, is they don't always get the players that they go for or are linked with Arsenal. So I cast my mind back to Lisandro Martinez was their top target for that sort of left centre-back stroke left-back role. He ended up going to Manchester United, and Arsenal bought in Zinchenko, who did a great job for them in that particular role at that time. He's seen a lot less game time of late, and he's been linked with a move away. His contract is edging closer towards the end, and they'll have a decision to make there. I think there were players higher up the priority list than maybe Timber. I can't remember for sure. Certainly on Trossard, you mentioned there that it was Mudryk, and in many positions. I'm trying to think back to even if Jesus, there was somebody ahead of him, but we referred to Vlahovic and Sesko earlier, and then sort of a Havertz has come in. So we can talk about these potential recruits, and it wouldn't surprise you if Arsenal pulled something out of the hat that you're not expecting, that I'm not expecting, that we learn about at a later point, that maybe even it provides us with a bit of a left field option, because they'll be exploring everything, and there'll be names that have come out and names that haven't. Look, Arsenal have shown their versatility in the market. They haven't got everything right, and Jordan talks through the midfield dilemmas well there. There's a lot of decisions on the horizon too. So what's going to happen with Partey and Jorginho, because their contracts are scheduled to expire in the summer of 2025. I don't think decisions have been made yet either way, and maybe a lot of it rests on if Zubimendi is definitely coming. I know there's a lot of hope at Arsenal that if he is to come, then with a full pre-season and his old sparring partner next to him, that Merino reaches a level that Arsenal fans have not seen. Don't forget that he was afflicted by a really unfortunate shoulder injury right at the beginning that delayed his debut. Rice is, should be getting better, and they need to solidify what position that's in. But he's an amazing player and character and leader for club and country. So ultimately, this was meant to be a reactive market for them. If situations unfold, such as injuries and circumstances, they'll be ready to do something. There is some resource available. It was never identified as being a proactive market. People can argue that all they want and say that was the wrong approach, but it's usually January a reactive market for pretty much every club. And now comes the time for the reaction. And so what are they going to do? How are they going to pivot? What opportunities will present themselves? It's time for obviously Jason Ato to step out to the plate as interim sporting director, for the hierarchy of Richard Garlick as MD, of James King, who's come in as director of director of football operations. You've got Tim Lewis there, who's really influential on the board and from a hierarchical perspective, and on behalf of the ownership. You've got Josh Kroenke, who's the most active from the ownership, and his father. Everybody has to step up if they want to fulfill their aims of delivering this season, and at the centre of that is Mikel Arteta. He's really powerful, really influential. This is his project. He's moulded this team to his desires. The recruitment has, by and large, been the players that he has wanted, and so everybody has to deliver now. But they've got a couple of weeks, and whether it's stuff we're anticipating or not, that they'll need to react, and I do think they will do something. I just don't know exactly what it is just yet, and let's see if it's what they need and what will prove to be the right step, because there's no guarantee that they'll do something and abracadabra, your dreams, Arsenal fans, are fulfilled.
Yeah, okay. A couple more weeks left. Fingers crossed, Arsenal fans, someone comes through those doors. Right, next we'll look ahead at what's to come for Arsenal and the impact of the win over Tottenham. Jordan, it was really interesting, actually. Amy referenced how stretched the squad have been recently. And while injuries have also blighted their season, it's also presented some really interesting opportunities for certain players. Watching Myles Lewis-Skelly yesterday from the stands, was incredibly impressive for an 18-year-old. He's become the second youngest player to start a North London derby for Arsenal in the Premier League behind Cesc Fabregas. But, watching that young man, I wouldn't even say young. He looked like a grown man in that position and befitting of the actual scenario of a North London derby. Didn't feel like he was out of kilter at all.
No, like ever since he first stepped on the pitch, I've thought there's no way this boy is. Well, he was 17 at the time, 18 now. Like you even look at him at the penalty at the corner kick where he had a little bit with Bergvall, and then the way he just starts like trying to g up the crowd, and you think this boy has got absolutely no fear. Declan Rice made a good point that he protects the ball almost like Moussa Dembele did at Spurs. He's got those big legs, and I think you look at Saka and Nwaneri. You got to give credit to Arsenal and the amount of work that they do with their academy players to get them ready physically to go in the Premier League level, because a lot of players don't make that jump and a lot of clubs don't prepare them for the physicality of it. But Skelly has got a man's body already at 18, and I thought he was exceptional. You look at, actually, it feels like he's been in the team for months and months, but the Everton game on the 14th of December was his first Premier League start. We're talking just over a month. He's now cemented himself in that position. And even if when Calafiore comes back, I'm not sure that Arteta is going to take him out of the team, because we all know how much Arteta likes to be able to trust his players defensively. And I don't think he's got any qualms over Skelly switching off or having a little moment that we've seen with Calafiore and especially Zinchenko. So I don't see him giving up that position. And I think the way you see his teammates talk about him, that's how you always judge a young player, is with how much the teammates trust to give them the ball in situations. And the way he can just, he invites the pressure and just uses the other player's body and just spins them and then busts through a gap. You can see sometimes he gives Arteta a heart attack on the sideline when he does it, but he's adding something different, a bit of dynamism to Arsenal, a bit, especially down that left side when we speak about injuries. Arsenal haven't had cumulatively not that many more days missed compared to this time last year through injury. It's just where the injuries have happened and the timing of them, which has been so important. There's been 10 different left back combinations in 21 league games. That is no recipe for stability or building fluidity. It's because they've missed Ben White basically the whole season. Odegaard was out for a month. Saka's now going to be out for 2-3 months. So missing that right side, which has been so important to Arsenal, it's no surprise that their attacking output in some games from open play has really dropped. I think Lewis-Skelly and Rice yesterday showed that Arsenal can maybe become a bit more of a neutral team, a bit more of a balanced team in Saka's absence, which might not be the worst thing for them to learn how to attack on both sides. So I think that it could actually be another bonus for Arsenal. And you talk about, David's spoken about, you don't always get your perfect first choice target. You need to adapt, and then that changes the team and the dynamics of the team that you imagined. Sometimes players get injured and Nwaneri comes in at right wing, or Rice goes to 8, or Havertz goes up front. Skelly, Arteta probably deserves more credit actually for what he's done with Skelly, because let's not forget he came through as a midfielder, and Arteta spotted that very early in his training that he could be that inverted role or plays a natural left back. So he deserves credit for spotting that potential and bringing it through. But Nwaneri was the one that everyone looked at the start of the season was, it's now time for him. He's that good that he has to make the step. Skelly was maybe thought a little bit behind, or just there wasn't the opening there that there was in midfield, but he certainly changed the narrative.
Yeah, I'll just pick up on that because while we're recording this, Sami Mokbel, a fellow journalist of ours, excellent one in the Daily Mail, and he broke the Martin Zubimendi story earlier this week. He's reporting that there is going to be an opportunity, quite possibly, for Lewis-Skelly to play in midfield from next season. Now, obviously, there's a lot that would still need to fall into place, but Jordan points out that that's where he came through, and he's got quite a highlights reel from his time in the youth team of transitioning between attack and defence and carrying the ball and laying on goals. It's funny you mentioned. And Declan Rice mentioned Moussa Dembele in terms of ball protection, but also driving runs. There are similarities with somebody like him there. And I do agree with Jordan about praising Mikel Arteta for firstly giving Lewis-Skelly and Namweri the opportunities, but also having the trust and the faith to experiment with the left back role, which was being trialled in training for quite some months before it came to fruition on the match pitch, and trusting in him on big stages with high pressure. And he's taken to it really well, Lewis Skelly. The way he connects with the fans and riles the opponents is quite something at such a tender age. And, this is a part of Arsenal's DNA to give youth an opportunity. They've had a long history of relying on players they've brought through. And there have been moments that has been questioned in recent times, even on this podcast, of Arteta and his willingness to give those players their heads and also what there is at Arsenal available to Mikel Arteta. They don't have floods of players coming through the youth ranks of the required quality. That's the reality, and they know it. And certainly compared to some other clubs, there's not exactly platoons like you see at places on the continent, or even in some circumstances in England with, say, a Manchester City or Liverpool in the last couple of years, a Chelsea too. And Lewis Skelly has taken to it really well. Namweri will be back soon. He is a prodigious talent, again, for club and country. And Arsenal, full credit to them for developing these players, full credit to the players and their surroundings for how they've risen to it. And they look to have very promising careers ahead of them.
There's an interesting point about Arteta and the academy, because last season I was critical of him as well as many other people were when the PSV did rubber in the Champions League. He never brought on Waneri or any young players. He only had a couple on the bench, and you just thought, there was questions over how much he was willing to give the academy a chance. Obviously, they've got to be good enough, but I asked him at a press conference last season, is it good enough? And he says, no, the level's not there. So this season, for Waneri and Skelly to assert themselves as proper trusted first team players is quite big. But if you look back through his whole tenure at Arsenal, at very important points the academy's come through for him. We forget Smith Rowe and Saka, them coming into the team was what really changed the fortunes when he was going through a difficult period. That sort of wiped the slate clean, and it really helped the fans get behind the team.
Yeah, very quickly, before we wrap up, Jordan, Villa on Saturday. Arsenal can't afford, not to win that match. But, this is a team, they've got one over this season. But you think about the back end of last season, the Unai Emery masterclass to derail Arsenal's title challenge. Arsenal need to be near perfect if they're even going to stand a chance of competing with Liverpool from this point onwards. And it's heavy pressure.
Yeah, no, it is. And I mean, Villa done the double over Arsenal last season. The home game, again, another one of those that we talk about, Arsenal chances, then killer blows at the end, punished. So I think that'll be on the minds of the players. They want to try and right that wrong. But you're right, a lot of title races, they come to belief, and you feel it through the season. Is it going to be their year? And it tends to be these moments where you've got a chance to really close the gap or change the momentum of the season. I think if Arsenal can go back to back, Spurs, Villa, and Liverpool have got to go to Brentford, that could potentially be a huge 4 or 5 days in the title race if Liverpool slip up. So I think Arsenal have got to win this game, because the belief that you've got there from the Spurs game, it's reset things and it's gone, right, this season is still open. It's not completely done. If they then drop points to Villa at home, it just gives it that nagging doubt again that they really have what it takes to go and win 15 out of 18 or whatever it is, that they're going to have to do. So I think that it's huge for Arsenal to get over the line. Obviously, the narrative potential of Emery again is there, but Arsenal have dominated most teams they've played this year in terms of territory. It's just some games early in the season it was chance creation. Lately, it's been chance conversion. But it was the same pattern as last season. It was the exact same. Stodgy first 4 or 5 months. Then it clicked. Then they missed some chances, had a bit of a bad few weeks, and then they clicked into gear. So if Arteta can show again that he can change things in season and he can get them on that, he can find that vein of form. I wouldn't write off Arsenal going on a run. They just have to show that ruthless edge that they've been missing.
Okay, for sure. Gents, let's leave it there. David, Jordan, thanks for your time. And thank you so much for listening. Adam Leventhal will be with you tomorrow for the preview. Enjoy. If you want to watch more episodes of the show, please subscribe to the channel. We'll be joined by the likes of David Ornstein, Matt Slater, Adam Crafton, Carl Anker, and plenty more through the season. If you'd like to listen to the episodes in full in audio form, search The Athletic FC wherever you get your podcasts from.